Over the past couple of weeks, Cyberpunk 2077 has had a lot of new interviews, news, and actually even some in-game screenshots come out, giving us quite a bit of additional details around the game. We're currently still in a rather quiet period, at least compared to where we'll be in just a few weeks' time. Right at the start of September, it seems like CD Projekt is actually going to release another 50 minutes or so of gameplay from this game. This is the gameplay that's been being shown behind closed doors, so we should have a lot to talk about then, but leading up to that, they are certainly teasing us, actually posting several images from this very gameplay. As I mentioned in the past, I was fortunate enough to see this gameplay back at E3, so for a little bit of added context, what you're seeing here is actually one of the boss fights you're going to see during the longer gameplay. This is basically one of the gang leaders and a very tough enemy overall. As you were fighting her, there was these little signs that were consistently popping up and just some other environmental things going on, by which this enemy actually would consistently smash through them, showing quite a bit of that environmental damage system. Now obviously the screenshot does a pretty good job of showing that off, but just in general it's a pretty cool segment and one of the best parts of the gameplay in my eyes. We also see a new picture of this motorcycle just being stopped. This is more of just an environmental image, there's not a ton to infer from it, but put simply, if nothing else, it definitely makes a good wallpaper. I'll have links to all of this down below if you guys are interested. A little while ago, Cyberpunk themselves actually tweeted out this picture. This is pretty cool, showing off one of the gangs you'll find in Night City, and although the character in the foreground as well as actually the weapon he's holding all look particularly cool, the part about this that actually caught my eye the most was that car in the background. We know there's going to be a wide variety of vehicles and vehicle ownership and driving. I'll actually have additional details about that in this video, but at least to me, that car actually looks pretty awesome. We've seen it in the past in promotional imagery, but this is the first look at an in-game model of it. And then finally, one other image from the gameplay. This just actually showing off a nanowire as well as some stealth mechanics. During the gameplay you see at the start of September, there's basically going to be kind of a heavy run and gun style, but then they also switch to a netrunner stealth style. During the stealth style, they use the nanowire to do takedowns on enemies. That's what you're actually about to see here. And there's actually a wide variety of different methods to do takedowns on enemies, including some that involve environmental hiding or just environmental damage. But outside just new in-game screenshots, we also got a wide variety of new interviews and details around Cyberpunk. I went through many of these interviews and tried to pick out some of the new and otherwise interesting details, but this first one's actually a little different. The original source is actually a Polish radio interview from YouTube, although unfortunately there's no subtitles or really anything to translate unless I knew Polish, which I don't, but a translation was actually provided online by the Neon Arcade, or rather somebody sent the Neon Arcade a translation. That's another YouTuber. I'll link to his channel down below, but otherwise looking at a few of the big things we hear about from this interview. You guys remember not too long ago CD Projekt Red on Twitter were actually sharing all these kind of styles of Cyberpunk, and during this interview we find out those aren't just conceptual, those are actually in-game styles that you will see, both in the architecture of the world, but also in the clothing that certain NPCs will be wearing. But just in general, these four concepts will be very much so represented in-game. They also talk a bit about the story and really the overall theme of the story of Cyberpunk. Speaking broadly, they do mention that the story is meant to be an adult, describing how this isn't like a kid's game. There are going to be very serious topics, and in turn, very difficult decisions that you'll be having to make. And they do mention how overall the game's not going to be shying away from some of those difficult real-world topics because it's what affects people, and it's what you're going to actually end up seeing in this game. Also, there's not going to be a clear-cut version of what's right or wrong. You're going to define your own morality, and there's going to be a lot of different perspectives given to you, so things won't just appear black and white. There's probably going to be some hard choices of choosing between the lesser of two evils. They also do talk about how, just speaking broadly, V's goal in Cyberpunk 2077 is going to be to free himself from Night City and actually achieve a better life. We know one of the main plot details is going to be this Immortality chip that's going to be a core part of achieving that better life for V, although it's not totally clear how those two tie in, whether it actually be immortality for himself or maybe selling it for a better life, but also that Johnny Silverhand, that being the character played by Keanu Reeves, is going to be a main part of this, and in turn a main point of the plot. And even further, that the relationship that you build as a character with Johnny Silverhand will actually shape the game's ending, which is pretty cool, and I don't think we've heard about that before. One of the other big things we've been seeing over the past couple of weeks with Cyberpunk is actually a big Chinese push. Just recently, the same demo that has been getting passed around behind closed doors of the game was shown in China, and many of those people got to interview the developers following the viewing of the demo. We got a lot of interesting details from that, and I would say this interview in particular that I'll have linked down below is one of the most interesting. One of the developers mentions that even though vehicles and fast travel are a thing, they really did build Night City as one of those cities that will have a lot of smaller details in some of the corners of the map, things that you would seemingly miss if you just travel by vehicle or again just fast travel everywhere. And really this is going to some degree actually incentivize just walking around, and if you do so, you actually will be rewarded. From a different interview, we also have heard that there is going to be special secret loot hidden around the map, that in the form of collectibles, also just the typical weapons or crafting items, and when trying to find some of these rare collectibles, there's actually going to be special ways to help you do so, whether it be installing a special chip on your character, or even alternatively that some of the NPCs will actually give you clues as to where certain items are hidden. As far as minigames in this world go, they mentioned how there'll be some minigames here and there, but they're not going to have anything as deep as Gwent as we saw it in The Witcher 3. Even further, as far as the main story overall, you're going to have the option to just play the main story without any side quests if you want to go that route. So if you just want to power straight through the main story and finish the game as quickly as possible, you can do that, but the side quests actually play a pretty important role. Many of the side quests are going to contain extra details around main story events, so giving you a little bit of extra context. We also hear from other interviews how some of these side quests will actually give you additional options and affect main story outcomes, and even potentially the outcome of the game overall. But even further, that it's not going to be natural to not do side quests. It's described how while completing some of the main story quests, every once in a while it will direct you to a side quest. Probably one of those side quests that does give you a little bit of extra context or really ties in with whatever just happened during the main story quest. We get explicit confirmation here that there is a separate department at CD Projekt that is researching and developing a multiplayer mode, but they remain extremely clear that Cyberpunk 2077 is first and foremost a story-driven single-player game. So that multiplayer, although being developed, isn't their most important concern right now, and it won't be the main part of this game. But there's kind of been this weird back and forth where they at one point were saying it is multiplayer, then they were saying it's just R&D, now we're back to saying it's multiplayer. I think just through all of this various information, we can conclude that multiplayer is probably coming at some point. Now how big or small or exactly what that is totally unclear, and we definitely know it's not coming at release. From the Xbox magazine, which is actually one of the sources on that screenshot I showed you earlier, that Mike Pondsmith, the original creator of this particular Cyberpunk universe that CD Projekt is using to craft Cyberpunk 2077, will actually be playing a character in the game. He was actually set to voice Dex in the past, but somebody else ended up taking over that role. But overall, it seems like he's been very involved in this development process, and I imagine a lot of people that are big fans of Cyberpunk or even just big fans of Mike Pondsmith himself are going to be excited and pleased to hear this. It definitely is nice to see CD Projekt giving recognition where it is due and actually giving him a part. But then one final interview from PSX Extreme, we actually hear quite a bit more in the way of details about this world. The Badlands are basically the outskirts of Night City. We've heard some about this in certain interviews, but from this one we get pretty explicit confirmation that this is going to be a desolate and dangerous place. Humans went through the Badlands and destroyed most of what was actually there. And if you want to go there now, it seems like it's going to potentially be a high level zone. That's not explicitly confirmed, but the way it's described, it certainly feels like it would be, but it is described as a very dangerous zone and someplace you don't want to go while unarmed. The way they describe this, it certainly sounds pretty cool to me. It seems like it could be just this kind of high level and scary area on the outskirts of the map that if maybe you just want to go shoot some stuff, you could go there and do so fairly easily. But speaking of shooting some stuff, it's also described that when you actually use a weapon, a melee attack, or your hacking skill, these will naturally improve over time just from natural use with it. Now, it's not totally clear how this will improve, like if you'll actually earn additional skill points or if there'll be some other kind of mechanic around this, but I really like that. I like games that make it so it's a more organic progression, not just assigning skill points then your character is magically better, although likely that will also be an option here. In Night City, one of the ways you're going to be able to unlock certain quests or objectives is actually by earning street cred. You'll earn street cred kind of in the way you think, just by completing tasks or doing favors for some of the existing fixers that you can find around the city, such as Dex. But as you increase your street cred, you'll be viewed as more trustworthy by some of these people, and as a result gain access to more dangerous and serious quests, and likely some that probably have better rewards. And based off the way it's described, to me at least, it certainly feels like the street cred system will be a nice kind of branching off path, something that you can commit a lot of time to, trying to do a bunch of quests or missions in this category or for certain people, and in turn actually getting rewarded with more dangerous but hopefully more rewarding jobs. They talk a bit about apartments. We saw some gameplay of V's apartment in the older gameplay from last year. It's described how there's actually not going to be any customization here. What you see is kind of what you get, but even further, you're not going to be able to switch apartments. That's been confirmed in past interviews also. And And one of the main reasons for this is it's actually going to really act as a plot point. There's going to be a lot of meetings that occur in your apartment, and likely, I'm sure if some of those meetings don't go super well, maybe you'll get some damage to your apartment or other things happening in there. But the apartment also will have some functional roles. Obviously we saw sleeping, but also other things like storage and actually checking your email and your internet, which with the way Cyberpunk actually works, I wouldn't be shocked if you have to do this physically from your apartment and you can't do it wirelessly. As you'll see in the gameplay when it eventually gets released, a major point of this isn't wireless hacking, it's just hacking, but you have to actually wire into whatever you're hacking to. This is a security measure. There's a lot of lore behind why this exists and why it's a thing. So although this isn't explicit confirmation that you only have internet access or you can only check your email from your own player home, I wouldn't be shocked if you are fairly restricted in where you can do that due to this plot device. Although also, when you actually steal a car or bike in game, it's not going to immediately add that to your garage. You'll have to buy that bike or car to actually get it added to your garage. But stealing cars or bikes in general is actually going to be very dangerous. There's going to be gangs and cops pretty much all over that will react and come after you. So as we've seen from some of those other images I showed earlier in this video, animals will be a part of this world, but due to what society has done to the earth, animals are actually pretty rare in Cyberpunk 2077. You'll occasionally see the elite having some as pets, but you actually can't get your own pets. That was actually confirmed in a recent DM with the official Cyberpunk account. And yeah, taking it all together, that's a pretty good recap of some of the recent information we've both seen, heard. There's quite a bit of it, a lot to unpack, but a lot of really great stuff. Every time I do these videos, I feel like I just get a little bit more excited for this game. Occasionally there are the grounding moments where we hear something that's like, oh, okay, that's going to be a fairly limited system. Like when it comes to apartments, there's not going to be a ton of customization there, but there's always room for expanding that with, well, expansions, similar to what they did with The Witcher 3. But with all that being said, if you guys enjoy, you can leave a like or subscribe, but otherwise I'll see you all next time. Later.